Thank you so much for joining me today for this overview of neurodiversity. My name is Shezzy Kennedy and I am the Neurodiversity Training Director for Thrive. I'm going to talk you through today our overview of neurodiversity. Now, I am proudly diagnosed autistic and dyslexic. I had a late diagnosis as an adult, which I kind of experience things very differently and I see things very differently, particularly having that late diagnosis. And over the next 40 minutes or so, I want to chat about a little bit why in culture is super important when we're thinking of inclusion and looking at neurodivergent individuals in particular. So neurodiversity is a term and it's about understanding that not all brains work in the same way. Neurodiversity is the idea that neurological differences are natural and should be respected as such. It was a concept first used and put together by autism advocate Judy Singer in 1998. It's an umbrella term and it can encompass all different neurotypes, so like a neurological brain variations that include but are not limited to obviously the neurotypical brain, which is a brain that processes and works exactly how society expects it should. Then we have autism, which is a social communication difference with the ability to naturally interact with others in a way that's not typically expected by society, unless you're using a great deal of effort. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I'd rather use the word difference because I think disorder is a bit harsh. That's keeping attention on tasks that are not exciting or rewarding in some way, as well as some other differences. Dyslexia, that's looking at processing language, spoken language and in its written form. Dyspraxia, movements using fine and gross motor skills. And there is dyscalculia, and this is the ability to process or challenges within processing numerical data and numbers. And then we have dysgraphia. So this is differences within physical handwriting as well as organizing thoughts. And then there is Tourette syndrome, so that's managing spontaneous body movements, maybe vocalizations that are called tics. Now, all of these differences, they include variations in intellectual abilities, learning styles, how an individual can emotionally regulate themselves, and how they experience the sensory world around them, so sensory sensitivity. But the important thing to remember is neurodiversity means everyone different, not broken. And that's really important to remember. And what I'm going to do now is there is so much jargon around the neurodiversity kind of community and space at the moment. So I want to go through some of those words. I don't expect you to remember and pass today, but having gone through them, they may just help to make sense a little bit more when you hear these words come up at various points. So obviously neurodiversity, as we said, is the biological reality of infinite variations of brain types and functioning of behavior, so different, not broken. We then have neurodiverse. This term is often used instead of neurodivergent, yet it can be problematic. A group of individuals can be neurodiverse, but equally some individuals, like myself, prefer to use the term neurodiverse over neurodivergent as a way to identify oneself. Although grammatically you could argue that one individual can't be neurodiverse, but equally I would counter argue, well, that I have autism and dyslexia, therefore I have a neurodiverse brain. But again, it's how somebody chooses to identify, that's okay, it's their identity, and it's not up for anybody else to question that. It's then the word neurodivergent, and this means having the cognitive brain that's functioning differently to what is seen as the social norm. So while the term seems to reflect a medical model, it is a word that many neurodivergent individuals are comfortable with using. And then we have the word neurodivergence, which is the state of being neurodivergent. Again, so many words that it's just nice to know. And then the word neurotypical. So this is given the kind of when you think that there is no such thing as a normal brain, but it's not a neurodivergent brain. So there's this word neurotypical. And again, to me, I think that's quite a problematic, because it's saying this is the typical brain, so this is the best brain, and that's not true either. So when we look at wording, it's finding words that aren't maybe as problematic, and we're always learning as we go, and language will always improve as we go. So when we think of neurominority, and now I really like these different wordings. So neurominority, a group of individuals who may well be autistic, dyslexic, or have any of the differences that we've already mentioned, but they are in the minority of the way that their brains functioning. So we are in the minority of the population. And then there is neuromajority. Again, it's a kinder, in my way, to think of neurotypicals, because if we have neurominority and neuromajority, it doesn't feel like such a power imbalance. They are just quite, they're quite neutral words, which is great. And then we have a neurodifference. And again, coming back to our terminology and trying to find new ways to better communicate, a neurodifference is a much kinder word rather than saying condition or disorder, because either of those words imply something is broken and needs fixing. So this is just about how we change our language and how we think about what we're saying, really, and how that can negatively impact others. There are many myths that surround the neurominority community, and these are just a few of them. There are tons. But dyslexia only affects reading. Again, this is untrue. Individuals who have dyslexia face many challenges in day-to-day life, such as processing information like directions, knowing left and right, being able to stay organized, remember where you put things. There's many things more that go on rather than just reading and writing. Autism can be cured with medication or therapy. This is completely untrue, and there are some really cruel things that have been marketed in a way to try and cure autism. However, with support, autistic individuals can learn strategies to help them find life more manageable in a world that just wasn't designed for them. Individuals with Tourette syndrome are violent or aggressive. And again, this is false, and this is thought to come about due to a poor media representation of the Tourette's community. Another one is dyspraxia, that it only affects children. And again, this is a complete myth, because adults experience dyspraxia still as well, although with age, the challenges can reduce as an adult kind of learns better coping mechanisms to manage their dyspraxia, but it doesn't mean that it's disappeared. ADHD is a result of too much screen time or video games. Again, completely not true. However, some symptoms of ADHD can be better managed with a less sedative lifestyle. And then one that kind of winds me up the most is we're all on the autistic spectrum. And again, that's completely not true. And although if you look hard enough, you may find traits that are recognizable in everybody as an autistic behavior, but it doesn't mean that everybody is autistic. Equally, like you can experience symptoms of pregnancy without being pregnant. So you may get heartburn, tummy flutters, or put on weight. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're pregnant. In fact, you're probably not. And there's a saying that I quite like, which is just because you live in a garage doesn't make you a car. It might seem a bit of a random saying, but it is just as bonkers as assuming that we're all a little bit autistic or we're all a little bit dyslexic. We're not. And by saying those sentences, you are taking away from the differences that those individuals who experience those differences actually have, and not really appreciating how much effort they have to put into everyday life just to get by. Obviously, I've spoken of some of the challenges and differences that neurodivergent individuals face, yet there are huge benefits, and not benefits as in this is an advantage, but it's not all doom and gloom. Individuals who are neurodivergent are often highly creative, and when you experience the world in a unique way, you have the ability to think about things that are maybe not the norm. And this leads to so much more potential in finding solutions to problems that maybe others struggle with. A lot of individuals have a great eye for detail, and this can be a huge competitive advantage, particularly in the business space, or you're trying to create a new concept or a new idea. Having that ability to be able to take a completely different viewpoint on a topic is really advantageous. And then we look at attention to detail. So there are some neurodivergent individuals, again, not all, but some, who can be really good at noticing those really fine details that others may miss. And again, this can be really helpful in roles that require precision, like accounting, engineering. But it's really important that we don't end up playing into stereotypes and assuming that every autistic individual is amazing at maths, for example. I'm terrible at maths. Breaking down social norms. So there are many people who are questioning why of processes and procedures. A lot of neurodiverse individuals in particular are used to being on the outside of expectations, and as such are far more willing to explore other ways of working and questioning the why of a process. And this can lead to real innovation within businesses and looking and gaining that competitive advantage just because someone is willing to push back and question the why of doing something. It can be really hard if something doesn't make sense just to go along with it because that's the way it's always been done. The neurodivergent brain isn't designed to just go along with a process. And now, one of the most common challenges shared by all neurodiverse individuals is the challenge with executive functioning. Now, this is a mental process that enables a person to focus their attention, juggle multiple tasks successfully, have a good way to see everything can be a real challenge. And the way to think about that is to think of executive functioning a bit like air traffic control. Now, air traffic control has to respond to a lot of information and process instructions in a fast amount of time. And if there was no air traffic control at the airport, then it would be absolute chaos. And the same happens within the brain. When these cognitive processes are disrupted, it can lead to challenges within day-to-day function. And this is really important because neurodivergent individuals experience these challenges with executive functioning every single day. And many individuals work really hard to compensate for this. So much so that some individuals don't even realize that they're doing it. And they will just assume that they've always had to put in that high level of energy, that high level of effort just to get something done. Now, every single person, every human at some point will experience these same challenges with their executive functioning skills. Maybe when stressed or unwell or anxious or feeling overwhelmed. And it's that feeling that you're trying your best to complete tasks, to stay organized, to remember things, yet the outcome is just not what you'd hoped for. But the big difference is that the neurominority will experience this particular challenge every single day to some degree. And that's why neurodivergent individuals are protected by the Equality Act. Now, the Equality Act is an anti-discrimination law that defines the public duty to promote equality of opportunity. And I'm hoping that we've all heard of the term reasonable adjustments. And I'm assuming that you know that this is something that should be put in place as a matter of law within the workplace as adhering to the Equality Act 2010. Now, as stipulated, it is illegal to discriminate against anyone based on a number of different categories. Now, these include race, disability, sexual orientation, and gender identity. And disability is defined within the Equality Act 2010 as a physical or mental condition that has substantial long-term impact on your ability to complete day-to-day activities. Now, despite many neurodivergent individuals not identifying as having a disability, they are in fact covered by the Equality Act 2010. As I previously said, because your executive functioning, you have those challenges every single day. It doesn't go away, it just varies in degree. So not only is it law to put in place reasonable adjustments within the workplace, it's the right thing to do on a human level. That's really important. Now, reasonable adjustments must be unique to the individual person's own challenges and designed to give that individual a level playing field within their role so that they can achieve their full potential. So for some individuals to have the same chance of success as everyone else, there needs to be reasonable adjustments put in place. And what we need to be thinking about is, what is the difference between an inclusive workplace and an inclusive culture? Now, you may think that they are pretty the same, but an inclusive workplace is reactive in supporting those with additional needs. So it requires an individual to completely understand that they need support and to come forward and ask for that support. And in some ways, it requires that individual to even know what support they need. Whereas a workplace with an inclusive culture is proactive in supporting the needs of everybody. So where possible, there is already support there without an individual needing to ask for it. Now, an interesting thing here is, this is where, when I said at the beginning, I see things quite differently because I had a late diagnosis. So I wasn't diagnosed as dyslexic or autistic until my late 30s. Now, 25-year-old me, if I was working in an inclusive workplace that had support in place for dyslexic individuals, for example, 25-year-old me would never have come forward and said, I need that support, because I didn't know that I was dyslexic. So I had no clue that I needed that level of support. I just thought I was failing and I wasn't working as hard as everybody else. And that's the difference, because if there had been a proactive approach, there would have been things in place to have supported me anyway, even though I didn't know that I needed that support. Strangely, disability is one of the few things where the onus is on the individual to know, not only know what their challenges and differences are, but to know what they need in order to make it better. And that's not always the case. Once you are privileged enough to receive a diagnosis, there is a huge learning journey that you go on to discover about yourself and to discover what works and what doesn't work. And being self-aware is something that just not a lot of individuals really are at that level, which is where the value of being proactive with inclusion comes in. Reactive reasonable adjustments, let's just have a look about this. So reactive reasonable adjustments could be, there's change into the interview process that can reduce stress for an individual if they ask for it. Creates a quiet space for managing emotions, again, if asked. Gives assistive technology if asked. Provides lumbar supporting chairs, again, if asked. Now, one of the biggest challenges employers are currently facing, adhering to the Equality Act and providing reasonable adjustments, is a real challenge. And one of the most common things we hear is, if people don't declare, how can we support them? But that's not an excuse, and it won't wash. According to law firm Fox in 2022, there was a 40% rise in tribunals relating to autism and a 14% rise in dyslexia claims. And that was because even if individuals don't declare that they are neurodivergent or neurodiverse, they are protected by the Equality Act. And even individuals who didn't know that they had a neurodifference, once it was made obvious in a court of law through different ways of doing things, they were completely protected. For example, if an individual makes numerical mistakes within their work and they are dismissed for it, but they're later able to show that actually chances are they may have had dyscalculia, then they will have grounds to claim unfair dismissal if there was no reasonable adjustments put in place for them, whether that individual knew they had dyscalculia or not. If there were lots of errors appearing around numerical data, that should have been an indication that individual needed more support. So reactive and reasonable adjustments just don't make good business sense at all. So we need to be proactive. Let's think then, what are proactive, reasonable adjustments? How do we do that? So by being proactive, you have it in place for everybody without them having to ask. It's just there. So clear job descriptions, interview questions that are clear, specific, sent out in advance to everyone. Show the capability of interview rather than having to talk about it. Assistive software available on all devices, or at least a policy stating that it's available to you if you want to go and get it, no questions asked. Sensory safe environments. Every working space should have somewhere where you can just go and take a moment to just regain your thoughts. Agendas for all meetings. Nobody likes turning up to a meeting where there is no clear guidelines, there's no clear timings, everybody just thinks it's a waste of time. So agendas for all meetings are hugely beneficial. Simple to read, no jargon policies. If you're reading it and it wouldn't be able to be read by a fairly intelligent 12-year-old, it needs to be rewritten. And this way you're supporting everybody. You're even supporting the individual, maybe English isn't their first language. So keep it simple, keep it clear, keep it to the point. All employees share their preferred communication method. We all have different ways of communicating. We all have preferred communication skills. So just to have that as part of the culture, how do you prefer to be communicated with, can make a huge difference. And a very simple one, digital clocks that don't tick. The amount of people who get distracted by a ticking clock is amazing. And in fact, I'm surprised they're not banned. They're evil. Who wants a ticking clock? There's no need for ticking clocks. And what's really important, when we look at these lists of proactive, reasonable adjustments, you can see how, and this is just a small list, there are many more that you can add to this. You can get as creative as you like, but with being proactive, you can see how they can benefit absolutely everybody. The person who's experiencing migraines, for example, would appreciate a sensory safe environment. So you can just take a few minutes, when you get that flashing light in your eyes, you can take a few minutes to readjust yourself and hopefully it will pass. You'll notice with our slide deck that they've got a slight blue tint on them. The reason we've done that is to get rid of the white glare that a lot of individuals can struggle with, dyslexic individuals, dyspraxic individuals, and again, people with eyesight challenges, just taking that white glare. The migraine sufferers, get rid of that white glare. The stressed individual has been looking at their screen for 12 hours, get rid of the white glare. There's so many people it can help just by being proactive and just taking a little bit more time to think, how can we support everybody to achieve their full potential? And then we've got the important thing is that a culture of inclusion should include all of us. And that's really important, because the more we can put in place that is natural and part of an inclusive culture, the better we can be as a society. We want to make it the norm where we can ask questions of our colleagues and we can support them. What do you need to be successful on your worst day? And that could be huge. It could just be, when I'm having a really bad day, I just need very clear instructions. Tell me, what do you need from me? When do you want it done by? I don't need loads of extra words. Just tell me what you need. Or maybe on my worst day, when I really can't face getting the bus to work, I need to be able to work from home. And if that's possible, that's a reasonable adjustment. Being able to really see things from a different viewpoint and not to be just consumed by, this is the way we've always done it, so we're always going to do it this way. And really to understand that neurodivergent or neurodiverse individuals, not disabled by the condition, the difference, they're disabled by the environment. And that's so impactful. If you change the environment, more often than not, you will make a massive change to that individual, which is really important. And I hope that just from listening to me today, I hope it's given you a few ideas of how you can change things and maybe do something better tomorrow or even this afternoon than you did yesterday. And it's by making those small little steps every single day, we gradually get better, we get more inclusive, and we get to support more people. I'm just going to do a quick shameless plug. So every month at Thrive, we offer a free webinar, completely free. And next month, our webinar will be on Wednesday, the 31st of May, and it's entitled Overcoming Barriers with Natural Ingredients. And it's going to be hosted by Candice Mason, MD, founder of Mother Cuppa. No idea what a Mother Cuppa is, but I shall be listening to that. I'm going to thank you all so much for coming. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can. Shezzy Kennedy. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy your lunch. And don't forget, next month we have our webinar on overcoming barriers with natural ingredients. So that sounds super interesting. So take care, everybody, and have a great day.